Why are you wearing such a horrible color? Who makes such a horrible color? These were some of the first questions from my grandmother in one of the last conversations we had before she died. That's a horrible color, and with a twist of her lips and the look in her eye, she didn't have to say it aloud, but I could hear it, this guttural, ugh, reverberate the room. Now, I was very close with my gran. We were honest with one another. And I was visiting with her in the nursing home. By this time, she was failing both in body and in mind. Bless her, she was 94. And she had been as sharp as anything until this most recent hospitalization. But even still, the spark of her inner diva remained. An hour or so later into our visit, I thought we'd well moved on to other topics. But then her eyes fixated on my fuchsia sweater, probably a little similar to this color, and she recoiled, almost if there was like a demagogue dictator in the room with us, and said again with equal disgust, "That is a terrible color. Ugh, where did you get such a color?" It was so troubling for her that I changed. After lunch, I was wearing gray. This story is one example of how clothing and self-expression has always been of importance in my maternal family line. Annual events, holidays, special occasions always require new outfits. For us, dressing is both a pick-me-up and an art form. It's not so much about having to buy something new, of having to spend money, or having to be, quote, in fashion. Fashion is what we're offered 4 times a year by designers, says the American model and actress Lauren Hutton. Style is what you choose. I can recall for you multiple shopping trips with my mom, from childhood to more recently, to find what was my style or what my look was going to be for a significant life event. From the discount warehouse we went to almost every year shopping for the new school year, to my first formal school dance, the ruffled purple taffeta with the matching bolero jacket, to the first interview suit when I was graduating from college. I wonder what feels of significance when you look back on your life milestones. What were you wearing? Who were you with? How did you feel? I remember not only the clothing in the shops, but also the conversations that happened on our car rides, the friends we had with us, the bonding between mother and daughter, and sometimes all 3 generations, because my gran would be along, and the feeling of joy, and also nervousness and discovery, as each of these memories were thresholds. Thresholds to a new school year, a threshold to puberty, a threshold to starting on my own as an adult. The meaning in these shared moments was the relationship building that came from the process, both an inner development we individually had with ourselves, an external one with one another. Going shopping was about the journey, not the purchase outfit in and of itself. This we felt even more intensely just a couple of years ago. Mom is in remission now, but in 2014 she was diagnosed and treated for an aggressive form of breast cancer. After my spouse and I were engaged to be married in 2016, my family came to visit, and while they were here, Mom and I went to try on wedding dresses. for the first time. And while neither of us said it, I knew we were both grateful that she was present with me as I had approaching that threshold. And I will tell you, every time I stepped out in a dress she didn't like, oh, I knew that immediately, because she makes that same ugh face that my grandmother makes. And I'm pretty sure I make that same face as well. Before we go further, I want to quickly address that something. And that's, as a female minister, I share my love of fashion with you, with also a bit of irony, because in every single minister's chat group page, you will find repetitive comments shared with ministers who are or who present as female about how they look. Whether it be positive or negative, some of these things are downright hurtful, some are crossing way over boundary lines. We get talked to, and we talk with one another a lot about appearance, what we choose to wear and what that might project, and when we care and when we don't care about that. Many times, both while in seminary and even after ordination, and yes, by fellow Unitarian Universalists, I have been told, "You're too pretty to be a minister." A microaggression, backhanded compliment code for maybe you're not smart enough to be a minister. I wonder if my male colleagues are ever asked or told that they are too handsome to be ministers. With that caveat out of the way, may I present Make It Work, Fashioning Hope, theology inspired by the television show Project Runway. Are there any other fans here this morning? All right, we got a few. Fans like those of you out there and me, many of us appreciate this television program because it's not just about the clothes, but rather the artistry of design that arises up from this hugely diverse group of up-and-coming designers from all over the world. Year after year, the show has just entered its 17th season. Our ideas of what fashion is expands when we bring multiple viewpoints and these designers and what their creations may bring. I admire their work as walking pieces of art. Pieces that people can wear and ideally feel good about themselves wearing them. The theology part, or where spirit of life is present, is what we might learn from the creative process we are allowed to witness firsthand. It is the process itself, the journey that we can relate to, because we human beings, all of us, we're always creating, whether that be art or music, our nest in our home, through our children and parenting and grandparenting or uncle and auntying, a project for work or school, and yes, even as we create our own identities and how we creatively express those identities through what we choose to wear. When people curiously ask me why I love this show so much, I tell them because I envision the design process in direct relationship to the journey of living life. Each week, the designers are given a challenge. Wouldn't it be nice if we got challenges just once a week? But like the designers, we have inspiration or insight that helps us meet the situation before us, and we sketch out the best we can how we want to move forward. Then we try to find the materials and resources that will allow our inspirations and ideas to be expressed. Sometimes we find exactly what we need. Sometimes we can't find the material we wanted, or we get it back to our personal creative workrooms and we find that the fabric is harder to work with than we realized. Sometimes we have an excess of materials, And we need to decide what is best left on the workroom floor. At some time in the process, we will get distracted or frustrated, or we will lose faith, or our visions will change. We will change. We will begin to get emotional, and then we find we are running out of time. This is the moment when we need, as co-host and show mentor for 16 of its 17 years, Tim Gunn would say, we need to make it work. Gunn says make it work is an enormously useful phrase. He began using it a number of years ago with his students when he taught at the Parsons New School of Design in New York City. Gunn says, I find that students who struggle with an assignment are inclined to abandon the struggle and begin again. This practice unnerves me because it's like playing roulette with your work. What assurance do you have that the next spin of the wheel will be successful? Important learning occurs when a struggle is examined and analyzed, diagnosed, and a prescription offered. Ergo, make it work. Sometimes we do make it work. And what we send down the runway of life, imagining the center aisle as a runway, is amazing. As it walks, it flows beautifully, and the colors swirl, and the details and embellishments are just enough without being too much. And sometimes we feel we are sending out a half-dress model. Our vision, what we wanted, does not match the hot mess that's in front of us. It doesn't communicate the way we had imagined it. The worst times are when we walk out into the world, draped fully in the vision of ourselves, in full alignment with who we know ourselves to be. And then we are judged and critiqued harshly. I recently officiated a really difficult funeral. In this family, there were children in their late 30s, and they had lost both of their parents within 19 months of one another to devastating, different, but equally devastating terminal illnesses. The most recent parents' memorial service was held at a funeral home, and from there we were traveling over to the graveside for the committal ceremony. I'd been asked by the funeral home staff to move my car, so it stood between their leader car and the hearse, assuring that I wouldn't get lost on our way to the cemetery. After a heartfelt service in which I, too, was moved to tears by what was expressed by family and friends, I went outside, still dressed in my clergy robe and stole, to move my car. And after I did, and as I was exiting my vehicle, I heard a loud voice angrily exclaim, "You're blocking my car." Startled, I took in the person, a man many years my senior, and his clear irritation standing next to his car, parked near the hearse, and my car was blocking his car in. I said, I'm sorry. I was asked to move my car here. That's fine, he said, but don't block my car. You're keeping me from being able to get out. Now, we all know after a funeral, emotions are super high. And even though I could see he wasn't trying to leave in that moment, and that he most likely wouldn't be leaving until I was leaving, when my car would be moved out of his way, I said, no problem. Got into my car, moved it to a position so it wasn't blocking his. And he went back to standing guard in front of his car, watching to see that I actually had moved by with a compatriot of his, another man about his age. And as I made my way past them and back into the funeral home with another vocalization of apology, the guy literally swiped at me in a dismissive gesture and made a noise pretty similar to a guttural sound of disgust, that ugh. And each of the men looked me up and down. And I knew in an instant what this was about. The deceased family, not the deceased himself, who was in his 60s, but the generations who preceded him, were of religious traditions that do not recognize female clergy, and were of a generation and culture that does not uphold women in public leadership. That guttural exclamation was protest to the very nature of who I am. It was as if they were saying, you, woman in the robes, are a fraud. You are just plain dress up. Beauty begins the moment you decide to be yourself, is a well-known quote of the late, great, eccentric, boundary-breaking fashion designer Gabrielle Coco Chanel. Chanel herself overcame poverty and societal norms to become the legendary fashion icon in her age and today. Women in leadership on all fronts have smashed glass ceilings that would otherwise have kept us boxed, expressing ourselves in ways culturally prescribed rather than of our own choosing. And our trans and gender nonconforming siblings courageously stride down the catwalk of life with similar and even more extreme judgments and fears to what I felt in that moment when those two men shamed me just for being who I was, because it didn't fit their worldview. London-based creative director of the fashion label Studio Nicholson, Nick Wakeman says, "When I turned 40, I stopped giving a fork. I don't care what people think of me. I will wear what I feel amazing in." On our shared journeys of self-identity, self-knowing, and self-expression, whether that for you might be your favorite blue jeans and a graphic t-shirt, a well-pressed shirt, a classic suit, the latest trend off the runway, you, if you're like me, your favorite sequin pants and matching fingernails, or maybe all of this just depending on the day, I invite us all to consider the invitation from Victoria Safford and choose our clothing with defiance, with attitude, with joy de vivre, and with intention. Every action is a sacrament, every move a symbol, every color is a song. This is a day we would risk anything to save. Beauty begins the moment we decide to become ourselves. May we each know to the core of our very beings, in each and every moment, how amazingly beautiful we are. Amen. And blessed be